The smell of wet soil and the silence of the night were the only companions on that forgotten farm in the middle of nowhere. My great-aunt had left the place as an inheritance, and as I needed a refuge from the city, I thought it would be a good idea to spend a few days there. However, my friend, I had no idea what I was about to face. It all started with some howls. Not normal wolf howls, but deep, disturbing howls that made my hair stand on end. I thought it was just the neighbors trying to scare the newcomer, but soon I realized it was something more, something not at all human. On the first night, I ignored the howls and enjoyed the tranquility of the farm. I cooked some snacks, opened a beer, and sprawled out on the porch. But the full moon was there, shining brighter than ever, illuminating every dark corner of the property. That's when I began to notice some strange footprints around the house. Large, deep footprints, as if made by a very heavy animal. I was already getting uneasy, but my urban mind insisted it was just a big dog. Ignorance is bliss, right? On the third night, I decided to play detective. I armed myself with a flashlight and followed the footprints. If I had known what was coming, I would have packed my bags and left right then. But, that night, curiosity got the better of me. Armed with a flashlight and dubious courage, I followed the footprints to the edge of the forest. The darkness was thick, and the sound of dry leaves under my feet echoed like a sinister whisper. I stood there, watching the shadows, when a movement caught my attention. A dark figure emerged from the darkness, its yellow eyes reflecting the faint light of the flashlight. It was indeed a werewolf. Its black fur gleamed under the full moon, and its sharp claws were on display. My heart raced, and my whole body froze. The creature stared at me, sniffing the air with a wild expression. For a moment, I felt trapped, like an animal facing its predator. But before any attack could happen, the werewolf turned and disappeared into the darkness. I stood there, trembling, unable to understand what had just happened. The werewolf seemed to have given up on attacking me, but the feeling that something was wrong persisted. I went back to the house, locking myself inside as if the walls could protect me from what I couldn't comprehend. The following days were marked by constant tension. The howls continued, but the werewolf didn't show up again. I remained alert, expecting to see it again at any moment, but the creature stayed in the shadows. Eventually, I decided I couldn't live with the weight of that uncertainty. I packed my things and left the farm behind, as if fleeing from something that could still haunt me. Along the way, I looked back, half expecting to see the yellow eyes among the trees, but nothing happened. I never heard from the werewolf again, but the memory of those haunted nights stayed with me. The city, with all its noise and lights, became my refuge, and the farm remained only as a distant memory of something I couldn't explain. Weekends at Grandma's farm are always peaceful, right? But my last one was one of those that left me creeped out until now. Like, I'm a city guy, and you know how it is, the countryside is all peace and quiet. At least, that's what I thought until this crazy thing happened. Grandma has always been the kind of person who talks to animals. Not figuratively, but like, as if she had real conversations with them. I always thought it was just a figure of speech, you know? But when I got there, I saw it wasn't quite like that. Grandma lives on a farm in the middle of nowhere. That place surrounded by bushes and with a spine-chilling silence. I arrived there on a Friday, all set to enjoy the weekend and forget about the big city problems. On the first day, while we were having coffee in the backyard, she started talking about a black goat that lived at the back of the farm. She said something about it being special. She casually mentioned these things, and I laughed, thinking she was just joking. But, man, it wasn't a joke. The afternoon came, and out of nowhere, Grandma called me to go to the pen where the said goat stayed. She swore there was something I needed to see. I confess I went there with skepticism, thinking it was just Grandma making up stories. When we got there, the black goat was there, in the corner, looking at us with yellow eyes. It seemed calm, but at the same time, it gave me the creeps. That's when Grandma started talking to it, like having a chat with the neighbor. Then Grandma looked serious, as if the goat had said something that displeased her. I kind of nervously laughed, still thinking it was just a little show Grandma put on to impress me. But, man, things started to get strange. At dinner, Grandma told me stories about the farm, things that happened decades ago. And the black goat always appeared in the stories, like a sinister spectator who had been there forever. Night fell, and Grandma, with a distant look, told me about local legends, creatures living in the shadows, and the pact the farm residents had with these beings. I started getting uneasy, wondering if it wasn't some prank of Grandma's to scare me. But things got heavy when, in the middle of the night, I woke up to strange noises. I left the room and went to the window. The full moon was illuminating the farm, and I saw Grandma outside, in the middle of the pen, talking to the black goat. Like, she was speaking, and the creature seemed to respond with eerie bleats. I stood there, frozen, trying to process what I was seeing. Grandma wasn't joking. She was really talking to this goat, which now seemed more sinister than ever. I spied from afar, seeing the two of them there, as if plotting something in the shadows of the night. Morning came, and Grandma acted as if nothing had happened. Breakfast was served, but the atmosphere on the farm was different. I tried to get that image of Grandma talking to the black goat out of my head, but it wouldn't leave my mind. I took a stroll around the farm, trying to clear my head. Every step, the silence of the place bothered me. I didn't find anything different, so I went to sleep, thankful that it was the last night in that place. In the middle of the night, I woke up, seeing shadows moving around the farm, hearing unintelligible whispers, and feeling yellow eyes watching me in the darkness. I still don't know if it was a dream. And something happened that left me disturbed. Before falling asleep again, I saw the black goat entering the room and standing next to my bed. I could hardly believe it. It was there, with its yellow eyes fixed on me. A shiver ran down my spine, and I found myself paralyzed in front of the presence of that sinister creature. I don't know if it was a dream, but the image of the goat by my bed was engraved in my mind. From that moment on, fear settled in me. At sunrise the next day, I found myself with deep dark circles. I decided it was time to leave. I returned to the big city with a lump in my throat and fear following me like a persistent shadow. The peaceful nights of the farm turned into nightmares that haunted me even when I closed my eyes in the safety of my city room. Since that weekend, I carry the weight of not being sure if what I experienced was real or just a manifestation of my own terror. That night still gives me chills just thinking about it. I was just a kid back then, trying to act tough, but that encounter with the werewolf at my parents' farm changed everything. It was a dark night, with the full moon illuminating everything. My parents always spoke of the eerie stories from that land. They said something supernatural roamed around there, but I always thought it was just stories to scare kids. Until that night, of course. There I was, excited about the idea of spending a night away from home, exploring the farm. My parents' old house was eerie on its own. The silence was heavy, and I could hear my own footsteps on the ground. I went to the barn, thinking I might find something interesting there. Then I returned to the porch. I was getting sleepy. That's when I saw it. There was a huge creature next to the barn, walking like a dog, with arms too long. I believe it was a werewolf. My heart raced, and I could barely breathe. I froze in place, unable to believe what I was seeing, even afraid of the sound of my own breathing. It didn't help. It stared at me, sniffing the air as if sensing my fear. My legs were trembling. It howled, making the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. Without a second thought, I ran and locked the door of the house. I rushed to my room and hid, hearing the heavy steps of the creature around the house. I stayed there, in the dark, trying to control my breathing while listening to the growls outside. It lasted about 10 minutes, I guess, I don't know. For me, it felt like an eternity. When the silence returned, the fear didn't pass. I couldn't sleep anymore. I waited for the day to break. When it did, I cautiously left the house, still fearing to encounter that creature in the bushes. But there was nothing. The farm was calm, as if the previous night had been just a nightmare. Nonetheless, the image of those yellow eyes stayed etched in my mind. I was never the same after that encounter. Even now, years later, I avoid my parents' farm during the full moon. To this day, I wonder what would have happened if it had decided to enter the house. My breath still quickens just thinking about the terrifying week I spent at my aunt's farmhouse. It feels like something straight out of a nightmare, but I swear every word I'll say is the absolute truth. I couldn't share this with anyone, especially not with my aunt, for fear of sounding like a lunatic or, worse yet, awakening something that I would prefer to keep dormant. But now, I feel it's time to release this burden I've carried since then. It was supposed to be a peaceful visit to the farmhouse, a refuge from urban chaos, away from the constant noise of the big city. My aunt has always been a warm host, and her farmhouse seemed like the perfect place to relax. However, the peace I expected to find there turned into a week of terror that I will never forget. It all began on the first night. We were all dining on the porch, enjoying the cool night breeze and the brightness of the full moon. The conversation was lively, and we laughed loudly, completely oblivious to what was about to happen. That's when I noticed something strange at the edge of the woods, on the other side of the fence that bordered the property. A pale figure, with long dark hair and no face. Dressed in white, she stood still, looking directly at me. A chill ran down my spine, and I was paralyzed, unable to look away from that disturbing presence. It was a woman, but something was profoundly wrong. She had no face, just an empty darkness where her eyes should be. On that first night, I attributed the experience to a frightened imagination or shadows playing tricks on my mind. I tried to forget, convincing myself it was just an illusion caused by the moonlight and my own anxiety. But the visits from the faceless woman didn't stop there. Every night, almost at the same time, she appeared. Always in the same spot, behind the fence, staring at me with those non-existent eyes. Something even more terrifying began to happen. Farm animals started turning up dead. Chickens, pigs, all displayed signs of a mysterious and violent death. Deep marks, like sharp claws, covered their bodies. I couldn't ignore the obvious connection between these events and the sinister presence that watched me at night. My aunt, oblivious to everything, was busy with her daily tasks, and I found myself in a dilemma. Telling her about the faceless woman would mean admitting the terror I was living through, and I feared she wouldn't believe me. I chose not to say anything and simply agreed with her theories about diseases, ticks, those things that can kill animals. Each night, the tension escalated. I slept little, afraid not only of encountering the faceless woman during the night but at any moment of the day. Her presence hung over the farmhouse like a dark cloud. Finally, after a week of torment, the faceless woman disappeared as mysteriously as she had appeared. Mysteriously, peace returned to the farmhouse. There were no more deaths. My aunt said that this occasionally happened, 2 or 3 times a year, like a plague that came and killed the animals. She mentioned a bunch of diseases to justify the deaths. I still don't know if she didn't know about the faceless woman. Today, I avoid talking about this experience with anyone, fearing to be judged as crazy. But whenever I visit remote places, the memory of the faceless woman returns, making me question the unknown and the horrors that may hide in the shadows of the night. One day, I took a stroll in the forest with my dog. The intention was just to take a leisurely walk. You know, the place was pleasant, but things took a sinister turn. We were following a trail, and my dog was already on high alert, sniffing the air as if sensing something strange. I, in my own world, continued the path. It was calm until I reached a clearing and came face to face with an old farmhouse, all covered in moss and hidden among the trees. As I got closer, the normal sounds of the forest faded. Before I knew it, there was a family of crazies in the middle, dressed in a bizarre way, with masks and everything. These guys were saying some weird stuff, like some macabre ritual, you know? The full moon made everything more intense, and my dog, by my side, had scared eyes just like mine. I wanted to get out of there immediately, but something held me there, just watching the eerie scene. The guys started chanting something in a language I couldn't understand, and in the middle of the clearing, they brought out a creature tied up that looked like it came from a horror movie. The thing was writhing, making a horrible sound. As the ritual unfolded, the flames from the bonfire went crazy, with a bluish light that gave an even more sinister vibe. At that moment, my dog backed off, and I was there, paralyzed, watching the creepy scene. Suddenly, the atmosphere changed, and I felt an evil presence, like a chill down my spine. That's when I realized the guys had seen me. All those masks turned towards me was disturbing, and a tense silence took over the place. My dog started growling softly, realizing that things had taken a turn for the worse. In a panic, the guys came towards me, with awkward and frightening movements. The forest turned into a labyrinth, and I ran like crazy. The last image I saw was them running in a bizarre way after me. Since that day, the forest has taken on a haunted vibe for me. I avoid that place like the devil avoids the cross. The sun was setting when I received the call. It was Miss Oliveira, a friendly lady who lived on a farm on the outskirts of town. She explained that her family was about to go on an extended trip and needed someone to take care of the place in their absence. Without hesitation, I accepted the opportunity. I needed a temporary job, and the idea of spending some time in a peaceful environment, away from the hustle and bustle of the city, seemed perfect. The next morning, I arrived at the farm. The old-style house was surrounded by vast fields and woods, creating a peaceful and secluded atmosphere. Miss Oliveira, a woman with gray hair and kind eyes, welcomed me warmly and explained the details of my stay. She showed me around the house, introduced me to the animals, and finally handed me a note with detailed instructions about daily tasks. While reading the note, something bothered me. In addition to the normal tasks like feeding the animals and watering the plants, there were strange restrictions. The most disturbing was the prohibition of leaving the house at night. No matter what you hear outside, do not open the door after nightfall, the note said. Another peculiar instruction was the special emphasis on feeding the goats. Never, under any circumstances, forget to feed the goats. This is crucial, the message warned. Intrigued, I questioned Miss Oliveira about the peculiarities of the note, but she just smiled enigmatically and said they were necessary precautions. With a warm farewell, the family left, leaving me alone with the mysterious instructions. The first days on the farm passed peacefully, with me fulfilling the daily tasks while the night brought with it an enigmatic atmosphere. However, as time went on, I began to hear childlike whispers. No matter how loud I turned up the TV or the noise of the rain outside, there were voices. One night, while in the kitchen preparing dinner, I saw something out of the corner of my eye. A childlike shadow, with empty eyes and a ghostly figure, stood outside the window. My heart raced, and my breath caught in my throat. I dared not move, watching the figure slowly disappear into the darkness of the night. Fear set in, but I remained steadfast in my decision not to leave the house at night. The voices became more insistent, sometimes whispering sad stories, other times pleading for help. I spent sleepless nights. On one particularly dark night, I saw a pale child, with wet hair and empty eyes, pressed against the window. Their lips moved, but I was unable to hear their words. A wave of chills ran through my body, and I stepped back, away from the window. As the days dragged on, the tension increased. I tried to occupy my mind during the day, but at night, the voices and visions haunted my thoughts. Still, curiosity about what was really happening on the farm grew. On the last day of my stay, the Oliveira family returned. They found the house in order, the animals fed, but I couldn't help but share my strange experiences. Miss Oliveira listened to me with a concerned expression, but her husband shook his head, dismissing the situation as mere products of imagination. I managed to suppress my questions, resisting the temptation to uncover the true nature of those childlike voices and ghostly figures. My buddy's farm has always been my refuge, a place where I could take a break from the madness of the city and relax in the rural atmosphere. For years, I made these frequent visits, enjoying the beautiful landscape and the animals that brought life to the farm. It was a haven of peace until that strange afternoon that turned everything upside down. I arrived at the farm that afternoon expecting the usual peace. But something was wrong. Silence prevailed, with no normal sounds of animals. Despite feeling a shiver, I dismissed it and parked the car, heading towards my friend's house. The door creaked when I opened it, revealing a dark interior. A chill ran down my spine, but I pushed the feeling aside, attributing the oddity to my paranoia. I searched the house, looking for my buddy, but found nothing. I went to the barn, hoping to find some explanation among the empty stables. That's when I came across a scene that made my blood run cold. All the animals, once full of life, were now lying on the ground, dead. Chickens, cows, even the horses, all there as if life had been drained from them. A horrible sensation overwhelmed me. I knew something very bad had happened. I ran back to the house, hoping to find my friend unharmed. But hope vanished when I entered the darkened house. In the middle of the living room, there it was, a black goat, staring at me with glowing eyes. Its gaze pierced my soul, as if it knew all my fears. It was a witness to a tragedy that I couldn't comprehend. I shouted for my friend, hoping he would appear from some dark corner. But the goat stood there, undisturbed, eyes fixed on mine. The atmosphere in the house grew heavy, as if there was something malevolent in the air. With my heart pounding, I left the house, escaping from that strange environment. I went to the car, but the feeling that something was very wrong persisted. I called the police, fearing the worst for my missing friend. The police arrived quickly, and together, we began a frantic search of the farm. Detectives scoured every corner, but found nothing to explain the death of the animals or the disappearance of my friend. Years have passed since that tense day, and I've never had the courage to return to that farm. The case remained unsolved, an enigma that left detectives scratching their heads. My friend disappeared without a trace, as if the ground had swallowed him. But what haunts me the most, every night when I close my eyes, is the gaze of the black goat. Those intense eyes that watched me in the darkness of that sinister house. The mystery persists, a dark secret that involves the farm, my friend, and the black goat whose gaze haunts my nightmares.